Louisa was a free spirit. Absolutely gorgeous girl.
Very talented. She spoke Greek, she spoke Arabic.
I think I've seen what looks like a dead body in Darwin Trail Creek.
The police prepared a file for the coroner. Their conclusion was that the cause of death was consistent with drowning.
I don't believe that my sister was suicidal. It had the hallmarks of something suspicious.
The water was only 40 centimetres deep. How is anyone drowning in this creek?
When he's like this, I tend to just keep to myself and isolate myself, and I think I really need to stop seeing Joe.
Joe is not his legal name.
I would witness him slapping her, hitting her. I did call the police. I called the police lots of times.
She was someone's daughter, sister. We just don't sweep things under the carpet.
By September of 2011, I'd asked Louisa to come and visit me. She's come with her boyfriend. Her right arm was bandaged, and I asked her what had happened there. She goes, "Oh look, I just fell down some stairs and just hurt it." I didn't believe it, of course.
Joe was standing right next to her. So Tass said, in Greek, so her partner couldn't understand, "You guys need to split up."
And she spoke in Greek that she wanted to get away and for him to leave. She also mentioned that she tried to come and visit me without him, but it wasn't possible. We converted back to speaking English, and I just let him know that you need to go your own separate ways. And he was in agreement with that. And I thought for a moment there that might happen. They left, and that would be the last time that I would ever see my sister alive.
Thank you.
And recording. Does Claire need headphones on?
Yes. Just about to do it, boss.
Sunday, October the 2nd, 2011, the last day Louisa was seen alive. What transpired on Louisa's final day depends on which version of events and the source you choose to believe. Part of revisiting this investigation was a reconstruction of the timeline to understand exactly what was happening hour by hour. This was the closest we could come to trying to put ourselves back at that day that Louisa disappeared. Both the police and the coroner have relied in part on the account provided by her boyfriend Joe. This is understandable considering he lived with her and was the last person to see her alive. However, it also raises concerns that the person recounting Louisa's final movements is the same individual who was facing charges for an alleged assault on her.
Yep, no, that's fine. You've just put it in.
The biggest thing that we could find was the amount of inconsistencies there were in regards to the boyfriend's account of what had happened. So on the morning of October the 2nd, 2011, the neighbours report overhearing Louisa and her partner in an argument that starts inside the house and ends up outside. Louisa is seen to be distressed. One of the neighbours offers to help her and observes Louisa with blood on her ear and her eyes rolling back in her head. The neighbour is driving to the medical centre. Halfway there, Louisa says, "Actually, please stop. I don't want any help anymore." And this is where it gets a little bit difficult.
Last day, timeline, which is going to be a bit of guesswork, really. Now, what time was the airport?
Let's say sometime in the afternoon.
Yeah.
As far as we're aware, Louisa walks back to her house, somehow makes her way to the Melbourne International Airport. The problem is that she didn't have any money. Yet she had this charm about her. I'm sure she would have thought, as long as I get myself there, I can figure it out once I get there. And unfortunately, this time it didn't work out for her.
2:10, she hails the cab.
She gets in a taxi and is quite upset, asks the taxi driver if she can use his phone, rings Joe and says, "Can you please come pick me up?" Joe picks her up at a point closer to her house and will only pay the taxi driver if the taxi driver divulges where Louisa was picked up from. According to Joe, he says, "What were you doing at the airport?" And Louisa says, "I was going overseas." There's a little bit of confusion about exactly what happened later, but it would appear that Louisa, her partner, and a friend of her partner drove over to George's house. George and Louisa were friends, and they also had a shared interest of drugs.
They came over together. Joe waited outside. We connected, in a friendship way. It wasn't nothing ever sexual. We had a good discussion about her life. We weren't long, probably 20 minutes. She mentioned her relationship, of course, how she had been wanting to get out of it. She was scared, After talking to her, I think it gave her that courage. She told me that this is it, this is the time I'm going to leave, and I felt like I helped her.
While Louisa was inside, Joe had turned to his friend and said, "I think Louisa is having an affair with George." And as they were leaving, Joe became quite angry, turned around, drove back to George's house and smashed his car window. The timeline picks up at around 4 o'clock, where Kaz, Louisa's neighbour, was at home and she could hear Louisa and Joe fighting.
I'm like, oh Lord, what's going on now? I've taken my kids inside, all right, go out, hang my washing, and then I just hear her, Louisa, screaming, "Please stop, Joe, stop, please." And because the units are so close, my backyard and her backyard are joined, you can literally hear people going up and down the stairs. So I'm hearing banging going up and down. Louisa's begging him, "Please, Joe, don't hurt me. Stop." And I heard the door slam, and then that was it.
It's believed that Joe left the house shortly after, and the timeline picks up again at around 8:44 p.m. that night. This is when Louisa goes over to one of her other neighbours and asks if she could borrow their mobile phone. The neighbour reports seeing Louisa having blood in her hair near her right ear.
And this is the second time that it's noticed that she has dried blood above her ear, wasn't it?
Correct,
Right side, whereas in the morning it was on her left side.
The neighbour reports overhearing Louisa saying, "Joe, where are you? I'm waiting for you." So from 8:44 p.m. onwards, all we know about that night is what has been recounted by Louisa's boyfriend. Joe didn't want to speak to us, So all we have to go on is the information he provided to police. Joe's version of events was that he broke up with Louisa.
I told Louisa to put all of my things in a pile. I didn't want to go inside because I was upset and I didn't want to fight. I told her that I didn't want to be with her anymore. I told her that she had ruined my whole life. I started crying.
Joe said to police he went back to his parents' house. And about 9:45, he goes back to Louisa's house. Louisa and Joe have some form of interaction, during which time he goes outside to pat the dog. When he goes back inside, Louisa is missing. Joe goes outside looking for her. He goes to the end of the street. He looks down towards Darebin Creek, and under the street light, he catches a glimpse of Louisa's pink dressing gown she was wearing and surmises that she must have run towards Darebin Creek.
I saw the robe under the street light as she ran away. It was done up. I thought if someone saw me, I would get in trouble for chasing her. I also thought it's not worth it.
Joe's account is that he went to sleep.
I went to bed and lay there waiting for her.
I got a phone call early hours of the morning, abusive phone call from Joe. He started to get off his head, abusing me for having sex or some, telling I'm dead. And he was talking about cock for rock, some rubbish like that. And I said, no, mate, nothing like that ever happened, But he was adamant, screaming at me, and then I hung up on him.
Joe didn't disclose to police about the late night phone call to George. It was the police that discovered that. So we know that Joe was awake at 2 a.m. That calls into question that Joe had said he was sleeping during the night. The next day, he allegedly found her diary, wrote a note in her journal.
I wrote in Louisa's book how I was feeling. I also put the date on it. I was hurt and cut up. I thought she had done the bolt and ran off with George.
According to Joe, he then took the dog for a walk down to Darebin Creek. It was at this point, he states, he stood on the bridge and could see her dressing gown floating in the middle of the creek. He then rang Louisa's brother, Tass.
He contacted me, letting me know that he was looking for Louisa and couldn't find her. I said, no, mate, I don't know where Louisa is. You need to start looking for her. She's not with me. And he goes, well, okay, I'll start asking her friends. He mentioned that he'd actually seen Louisa's pink nightgown from a distance in the creek. I'm thinking, you saw Louisa's nightgown, and what, you didn't go and approach it and get a closer look of what was going on, which I found quite odd.
Later, the police stood on the bridge where Joe said he was standing when he spotted her dressing gown, and they reported in the notes that they were unable to spot that location where Louisa was eventually found. 8 days later. So what do we know? So far, at the time of the creek, when Louisa's body was discovered, it was decided there and then that homicide wouldn't attend.
Correct. And probably suicide is what they were leaning towards. And yeah, no homicide squad needed, nothing suspicious.
I spent 3 decades in the New South Wales Police. I was Detective Inspector for 22 of those years. I have a specialty in investigating domestic violence. Right, criminology peeps, come in. Don't be scared. I don't think I can say that the police did a thorough investigation. Now, on surface of it, it could be a suicide or could be a homicide. You just don't know. But if I was called to a body in water, my first thing would be to think that it would be suspicious. So there is now an expectation that the police are more aggressive in arresting those offenders and bringing them before the court. My general gut feeling is, having read the brief, it was poor policing and that it was an assumption made that it was just a drowning. The police officer in Australia. Once she was identified and the police knew who she was and her history of domestic violence, I would have thought homicide would have been notified immediately. So there's nothing to say Joe was involved in her death at all. But what I'm saying is that he should not have been ruled in or out of the investigation at that point in time until the police had a clear understanding of the circumstances in which she died. We only have Joe's explanation or narrative of what happened to Louisa. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no follow-up or holding Joe to account.
Joe's version of events that he provided to police was that he saw Louisa running towards the creek that night. He said he was able to catch a glimpse of her pink dressing gown in the light.
I saw her all the way to the end of Tyler Street. I whistled, but she ignored me. She was bolting. I've never seen her run that fast in my life. I didn't chase her. I saw the robe under the street light as she ran away.
But the following morning, after Louisa disappeared, Joe is alleged to have contacted one of Louisa's friends. And when the friend had asked him what had happened, Joe had said he had chased Louisa all the way down to the creek.
Joe then said, "She ran out of the house and I chased her all the way to the creek." Joe was really angry and erratic. He said, "It nearly killed me. I couldn't breathe."
Yet when you read Joe's statement, he says he turned around and didn't go to the creek. So there is a clear anomaly, a disputed fact between what he's told one witness and what he's told the police. Now, to me, that's a glaring area that needs to be investigated.
Joe, in his statement, said that he saw Louisa running all the way down the other end of the street. I instantly thought, well, how is someone going to be able to see someone at night in the distance running? This is how we found ourselves standing outside Louisa's former residence in Preston at 9:45 p.m, exactly 12 years to the day, armed with a replica pink dressing gown.
They've gone. Okay, I can see you just now, that dressing gown.
While Claire stands on the corner of Seston Street, I set up 370 metres straight down the road where the dead end of Tyler Street meets the entrance to the Parklands.
I cannot tell that there is anything pink on you, and I can't even tell it's a human.
We tried so many times of different versions of me running away.
So even that car, we don't really see you.
And no matter how many times we tried to reenact that, we just couldn't recreate what he was saying, that someone standing where he was standing could see a pink dressing gown at the end of the street. A couple of days after Louisa went missing, Kaz, Louisa's neighbour, reported seeing Joe arrive at Louisa's house in a van.
I was in bed. It's still dark. I woke up because the headlights woke me up from my bedroom window, and I look out the driveway and there's a white van, and I could clearly see two men. And as they've walked into the front of the van, I could see that it was Joe. They were dressed in like painters' uniforms, head to toe. I hadn't seen Joe for those couple of days since I last heard him and Louisa fighting.
Now this doesn't necessarily point to any guilt, but it's certainly unusual that she was woken during the night. Now, I would have expected the police to raise this with Joe and to go back and speak to Kaz to get greater detail. But in the brief, there's no follow-up by the police to probe this.
I understand that Joe spoke with police on 2 occasions and provided one formal statement.
On the day that she disappeared, there is no suggestion by Joe there was any fighting or arguing. Yet the other statements indicate that there was arguing and fighting between Joe and Louisa.
Joe did not disclose any assault committed that morning. He did not freely disclose previous assaults on Louisa or how he treated her or spoke to her.
The fact that she went to the airport that day is an indication that she was making an effort to leave the violent relationship with Joe, that the relationship was coming to an end.
It was clear from speaking to Joe that he was finding Louisa's death difficult to cope with.
It sounds like when Joe was asked questions, he was too emotional to continue the interview.
My understanding is that the police allowed him to leave because he broke down and cried. I mean, that to me is astounding.
Joe discussed how Louisa's death had affected him, which appeared to be genuine. He was provided counselling contacts, which he requested.
To accept Joe's version of events on face value, which appears to be the case, is just a almost unbelievable oversight by the police.
I was very disappointed with the whole police investigation. I mean, this is the police finding. While there has been a long history of domestic violence involving both physical and emotional abuse by Joe towards Louisa, I have found no suspicious circumstances relating to this death. I rest my case.
When a police investigation, an autopsy, and the coroner's findings all fail to reasonably explain what Louisa was doing in the creek before her death, should the family feel satisfied that there's nothing else that can be done?
When the podcast came out, there was so much feedback coming in from just all over the place. It was quite incredible.
Let's make sure that Louisa's voice, though silenced, continues to be heard.
The gratitude is immense for the effort that was put into this podcast. I've actually heard it twice over, you know. It was difficult to hear, but it was shining some new light, which could probably help the case. Not long after the podcast, we got some interest from the legal team that were willing to take on the case.
I had experience and past experience consistent with drowning type findings. I could see exactly what went wrong very, very quickly. The fact that it wasn't the homicide squad that investigated this, it was allocated to a station level. And when an overworked and maybe inexperienced officer has to compile a pretty intimidating brief, things can get missed. Forensic pathologists and investigators, they have a tough time sort of nailing down exactly how someone died in a body of water, because water itself has an impact on the evidence. Taz wanted to have the finding of the coroner's courts overturned. It's a high bar. It requires new facts and circumstances to justify the reopening of the case. It took 5 lawyers a year to unpick the evidence, and one of the biggest things that we needed to do was get an independent forensic pathologist, which is why we got Professor Deflo involved in it.
I do autopsies for the coroner, investigate deaths, and I also provide opinions for persons who are concerned about deaths. The term consistent with drowning is one that's frequently used in post-mortem reports. And effectively what it means is that the findings were those which could be drowning in the right circumstances. It's not an absolute statement of this person has drowned. There wasn't an option to do another post-mortem or an investigation of the body itself. It was more an examination of the material that was available at the time. I was provided with the police brief for the coroner. It also included the post-mortem examination findings, toxicology, for example, photographs of the deceased. The body was found multiple days after the death had occurred. Deterioration had set in, and it really makes the autopsy a lot harder. Louisa had heavy lungs. You get heavy lungs in drowning because effectively you're inhaling water. And there's no real way of differentiating between the heavy lungs of drowning and the heavy lungs seen in other asphyxial causes of death, where strangulation is one of them, especially in the setting of decomposition. The pathologist, quite appropriately, did a detailed examination of the neck where the neck is examined in multiple layers, so each muscle is looked at in turn. When he did this, he photographed the neck at the same time. There were abnormalities in the neck which I think concerned me. The autopsy pathologist, though, didn't attribute significance to those abnormalities. I assume he felt they were probably post-mortem changes. To me, they looked like they could have been bruises. And when you see bruises, especially around the neck, one of the things you worry about, of course, is neck compression, manual strangulation. The evidence for her having drowned is slight. It's based on circumstances and effectively the body in a location where she could have drowned. I don't think manual strangulation in this case can be excluded, and I can't tell you whether the manual strangulation, if it did occur, would have been survived or would have resulted in death. In my report, I recommended that the cause of death should in fact be unascertained.
Dr. Deflo noted possible hemorrhages in the neck, which was very interesting from our point of view as lawyers. It does cast in doubt the finding of consistent with drowning. If there's bruising around the neck when a person is found in a body of relatively shallow water, and that person is a strong swimmer and quite tall, that then starts to create a constellation of factors that would justify the reopening of the case, and that's what we rely on as part of our submission to the Coroner's Court.
We've put in a coroner's application for that to be reconsidered, in the hope that if Louisa was met with foul play, they can get to the bottom of it.
No family should have to keep going for over a decade and counting, trying to get answers.
You know, I had a lot of guilt myself for a long time, and I still think about it even now, and it's just heartbreaking. She should be here. I absolutely feel that the system let her down. It was just really beautiful to see her in her absolute element of her young life. Louisa, her story, what she went through, what we all heard and witnessed, it just has to be brought out. She needed to be protected, and she wasn't.
I have a beautiful young family, 2 little girls. I want them to remember my sister being their auntie. no good. I just got to keep on persevering for them too, so Louisa's memory is not forgotten.